Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm on Fake Shasko, but this isn't a solo RPG sim episode. I wanted to make a kinda short video going over which raids you want to do while leveling up or even in the late game. Just kinda wanted to talk about which raids are still useful to do in update 15.7, what you should farm, and which ones you should just kind of ignore, because a whole bunch of you guys have been asking me this question lately. So the reason why I'm on Fake Shasko is because he's low level and he has some of the gear from some of these raids, and yeah, so I can kind of talk about it a little bit. So let's hop straight over to the raid. So first is Pirate Captain. Pirate Captain is an extremely important raid in this game, and is not one you want to skip over because obviously it is the first. In this raid is the one I did probably the most or second most on my Fake Shasko through the solo playthrough. The reason being is because the armor is super important to get early game. And no, you don't normally get that many drops, that's just because that was my daily quest, but anyways, the armor from him is super important in the early game, and that armor carries you for a long time. It's a very easy boss to solo, and since you can solo him pretty much on level on hardcore, that is why I say it's definitely worth farming. Anyway, so the next raid on the raid list is going to be the Obsidian Dragon. So this one isn't quite as important as Pirate Captain, but it is still pretty dang important. The reason why Obsidian Dragon is still important but not as important is because you absolutely need to get his main sword drop, because it is a very fat increase of damage, but you don't really need to farm him on hardcore for the armor because there is a raid 10 levels above this one. So what's the point in farming a whole bunch of hardcore for an armor piece from this boss if in 10 levels you can get a better armor piece from another boss that's just as easy to farm? So overall, the Obsidian Dragon, definitely get the sword, but other than that, you don't really need to farm it. So that was really fun. My game broke, but anyways, I'm back in with the private server. So the next raid is of course the Deepwater Den, and this one is a little bit important, but you can kind of bypass it. I know I just said the Obsidian layer isn't important because you can farm Deepwater Den. Well, the reason why Deepwater Den is semi-important is one, you get a really good sword very easily, and you can get it on normal mode. Two, it's kind of important to farm in hardcore because you can get the armor piece pretty quick, and it is a very easy boss to fight, and the armor piece would definitely be good for you in the Shadow Palace, but since the Shadow Palace is only 25 levels above the Deepwater Den, I don't really see a point in like going crazy for that armor. So one last thing before I hop over to the Shadow Palace. This is a really good raid to farm early on for lots and lots of potions, including defense potions, because those are kind of hard to get early on, but Deep Sea Angler drops a ton. So while I struggle to walk up there because none of my gear is loaded in, I'll talk about the Shadow Palace, and it is pretty important one to farm, mainly because of how much gold you get. Now, the gear is very good, and I would recommend you want both the armor and both the sword from it in order to farm the Sun Temple raid next, but overall this gives a ton of gold, so even if you're level 475, this could be a good raid to farm because you can do it super duper fast, and it gives just a ton of gold per run. I think it's something like 75,000 or so, and it's a pretty easy fight, and it gives the armor not too often, so that is its downside, but still, you want to farm this until you get the armor so you can move on to the Sun Temple. So the Sun Temple raid is probably the most important raid we have talked about so far. This is one you absolutely want to do a ton. It drops a lot of gear, at least one thing in every gear slot. It gives a supernova aura, which is very good in the end game, but you can only farm it on level. That is why I'm on Fake Shasko to show you that. If you're over a certain level, you can't get it dropped anymore, and it's really good, so it is good to farm a ton in early game. So this is definitely a raid that you don't want to pass by. It is very easy to do on hardcore. I don't know why I loaded it up on normal. And yeah, this gives a ton of gear, gives a decent amount of gold, and it is a fun challenge. I won't say it's super easy, but once you get the hang of it, it's a piece of cake. The next raid is of course Laboratory 1. This is also a very important raid to farm. You're going to be farming it just as much as you would farm Sun Warrior Temple. It is a little bit more challenging because it is a double boss, but due to how many pieces of gear you can put on in the game nowadays and how broken current skills are and runes, it isn't really that bad to do. So, Laboratory 1, you're basically just going to farm it until you're level 285. Once you're 285, you're going to hop straight into Crystal Caverns and farm it a lot. Crystal Caverns is actually one of the most important raids in the game because it gives you so many rune crystal bags, and it gives you a lot of XP, and it gives you a lot of stat pots. So definitely farm a lot more crystal caverns over laboratory 1 once you're over level 285. Plus, the crystal caverns is one you can return to if you want to continuously farm for pots and or rune bags. However, I wouldn't recommend farming pots from it if you're like max level. There's way better methods. Anyways, the next raid is of course the Rogue Hideout. So this is one at level 425. This is also one that's very, very important not to pass up. Pretty much every single raid from this point on is extremely important. You want to get the best gear on your level, and of course the best gear on your level is always going to come from a raid. So Rogue Hideout is one you're also going to be farming in the end game at level 1300 because it drops ultra pots, it drops rune bags, and it just drops them a lot. Especially the rune bags, it drops a ton of rune bags, and it is a very, very fast raid to farm if you're max level. I hopped over to my main account so I can actually access all the raids because obviously Fake Shosko is at max level. Also, I am going to go over the special raids after doing all the normal boss raids. So next on the list is of course Nest of the Colossal. Like I said about Rogue Hideout, this is a very important raid to do. Every single raid from this point on is important. Farm it until you get at least the best tier 2 gear. I wouldn't say go for the godly anymore because the true blue dragon katana is extremely hard to get, but it's no longer the best item in the game, so there's really no point to farm it crazy hard anymore. This does drop a lot of pots, drops a whole ton of rune bags, so in endgame it is decent to farm. If you enjoy it, go ahead and do it, and yeah. So the next raid is going to be Tartarus. This one, of course, you guys are going to probably get tired of hearing me say this, is a very important raid to farm, but this one is even more important than any of the ones before because it drops a whole ton of ward scrolls, and ward scrolls are extremely important for pet gems and all of that stuff. If you don't have ward scrolls, you're not going to be making pet gems effectively, and anybody, even endgame players, are going to be farming this for ward scrolls if they don't have a lot. The best way to get ward scrolls is of course daily quests, but besides that, Tartarus is always an option. And yeah, on level it drops amazing gear, and yeah, just a usual thing. Farm it until you get at least this tier 2 gear from it. Don't go for the godly because it's not worth it anymore. And then once you're level 850, move on to Dr. V's Labyrinth. And that is what we're going to move on to next. So Dr. V's Labyrinth is the most important raid to farm at the moment because it is the only raid in the game that still drops top tier gear. Most of my top tier gear comes from it. My laser core comes from it. That is one of the best items in the game. You absolutely need to farm Dr. V's Labyrinth. It is pretty much the rule of thumb. Whatever the highest level raid is in the game, you're going to be farming a whole bunch. And I don't really need to talk about it because I've made a million videos on it. So, on to special raids. Of course, the mines raid is extremely important because how else are you going to craft pet gems? You have to do the mines in order to even have a chance of getting a pet gem, and that is where you get a lot of gem dust and other things like that. Next is Sun Test. This is very important. You only do it once. Once you beat it, you can't do it again. After you beat it, you unlock Frost Dragon. Frost Dragon is no longer as important as it used to be. If it was update 11, I would tell you, you need to farm as much of this as you can. It is still fun to do. If you're level 800, I would skip it. It is way too hard to do on level 800 unless you have a full team. It does drop a whole bunch of tier 3 rune crystal bags and word scrolls, so if you need a whole bunch of those, you can still do it, but it is a challenge, and of course, Emperor of Time you can't even do. So those are all the raids and which ones I think you should farm and which ones I think you should skip. I know this video was pretty quick and short, but I just wanted to make a short little tip guide because a whole bunch of you guys have been asking me about these questions. Anyways, thanks for watching my video, and I will see you later this week with more content. Bye!